October 1944. Lorraine, France. The ground is soaked. Armor struggles through mud. The Moselle River has stalled the advance. Only weeks earlier, General George S. Patton's Third Army had been racing across Europe. Now it is grinding forward, yard by yard. Ahead stand the forts of Metz. Behind them, exhausted divisions. In October alone, over 1,200 men are killed. More than 6,000 are wounded. Nearly 1,000 are missing. The momentum is gone. And in the middle of this struggle, news spreads across Europe. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel is dead, one of Germany's most famous commanders, and a question begins to form. How did Patton react? To understand the meaning of that news, we need to leave the battlefield for a moment and go back to Germany. October 14th, 1944, the small town of Herrlingen. Early that morning, two generals arrive at Erwin Rommel's home. They are sent directly from Berlin. There are no reporters, no ceremony, no honors, only a closed door and a private meeting. Inside, Rommel is given a choice. He can face the People's Court, a public trial followed by execution. His family will be punished, or he can end his life quietly. In return, the world will be told he died from battle wounds. His reputation will remain untouched, and his loved ones will be spared. Rommel listens. He understands there is no real escape. He says goodbye to his wife. He speaks with his son. Then he puts on his Afrika Korps uniform, the symbol of his greatest victories. He walks outside. A car is waiting. Minutes later, Erwin Rommel is dead. But what happened in that quiet German town was never meant to become public. The next day, radio broadcasts across Germany carried a very different story. Erwin Rommel, they said, had died from injuries suffered during an Allied air attack months earlier in Normandy. Not from poison, not from political pressure, but from wounds received in battle. The Nazi leadership moved quickly. Flags were lowered. A state funeral was organized. Military honors were displayed for the cameras. Rommel was presented as a fallen hero of the Reich, a commander who had given his life for Germany. And for the outside world, there was no reason to doubt it. This was the version reported in newspapers. This was the version heard by Allied intelligence. This was the version that reached the front lines in France. The truth remained buried. Most people in 1944 truly believed Rommel had died from war wounds. The deception worked. Now, let's return to France. While Germany held funerals and speeches, the war at the front did not slow down. In Lorraine, rain still fell. Mud still swallowed vehicles. Shells still tore through the countryside. For Patton, there were no ceremonies, only casualty reports, only supply shortages, only pressure to keep the advance alive. His daily notes from October 1944 tell a clear story. Fuel was running low, ammunition was rationed, infantry units were exhausted. The forts of Metz refused to fall. Every mile forward cost lives. And among all these entries, there is no special mention of Rommel. No reflection, no recorded reaction, just war. To understand that silence, we need to clear away one of the biggest legends of World War II. For decades, movies and popular history have portrayed Patton and Rommel as personal rivals. Two brilliant commanders chasing each other across the deserts of North Africa, almost like duelists. But the real war was very different. In reality, Patton and Rommel never faced each other directly in battle. When Patton arrived in North Africa in late 1942, Rommel was already preparing to leave the front. By the time Patton launched his major offensives, Rommel had been recalled to Germany. Months later, when Patton was racing across France, Rommel was recovering from severe wounds after an Allied air attack. Their armies fought different commanders, different battles, different fronts. What connected them was not combat, but reputation. Each knew the other as a legend of modern warfare, not as a personal enemy. Now, let's go a little deeper. Even though Patton and Rommel never fought face to face, Patton knew exactly who Rommel was. Long before American troops landed in Africa, Patton studied German tactics. He read military reports. He followed the careers of enemy commanders. And Rommel stood out. Not as a politician, not as a symbol of Nazi propaganda, but as a battlefield commander who understood speed, movement, and surprise. Officers from Patton's staff later recalled that Rommel was one of the few German generals Patton truly respected. One aide remembered Patton saying that Rommel fought war the way it should be fought: fast, aggressive, and always pushing forward. Another recalled that Patton considered Rommel the most dangerous German commander in the West, not because of ideology, but because of skill. Patton wanted to defeat him, not out of hatred, but out of professional pride. Victory over Rommel would have meant proving that American armor could match Germany's best. But that moment never came. History separated them. Different fronts, different battles, different times. Respect remained, but the duel never happened. Patton respected Rommel not as an enemy, but as a master of mobile warfare. If you're interested in the real stories behind World War II, not the Hollywood versions, leave a like. It really helps the channel grow. Now, with all of this in mind, Patton's silence begins to make more sense. To understand it, we must step back into Patton's world in October 1944. This was not a moment of victory. It was one of the hardest periods of his entire campaign. The rapid advance across France was over. Supply lines were stretched to the breaking point. Fuel trucks could not keep up. Artillery shells were limited. Entire divisions were exhausted from weeks of non-stop fighting. And ahead stood Metz, a fortress city that refused to fall. Day after day, Patton ordered assaults. Day after day, casualties mounted. Progress was measured in yards, sometimes in meters. Patton's diaries from this period show a man under enormous pressure. He wrote about shortages. He wrote about failed attacks. He wrote about frustration with higher command, but almost nothing else. In those weeks, Patton was not thinking about legends. He was thinking about breaking the German line, about keeping his army moving, about winning the war. In that reality, the reported death of Rommel, a general no longer on the battlefield, became just another piece of distant news, important in history, but irrelevant to the fight in front of him. Not a moment for reflection. Only another day of war. Now, with everything we've seen, Patton's silence begins to feel less mysterious. To understand it fully, we must step back into Patton's world in October 1944. This was not a moment of triumph. It was one of the darkest stretches of his entire campaign. The lightning advance across France had come to a halt. Supply lines were stretched beyond their limits. Fuel ran dangerously low. Ammunition had to be rationed. Men who had fought for weeks without rest were reaching exhaustion. And ahead stood Metz, a fortress city that refused to break. Day after day, Patton ordered attacks. Day after day, soldiers fell. Progress was counted in yards, sometimes in feet. His diaries from this period reveal a commander under immense strain. He wrote about shortages. about failed assaults, about frustration with higher command, about the cost in lives, and almost nothing else. In those weeks, Patton was not thinking about history. He was thinking about survival, about momentum, about forcing a breakthrough. In that brutal reality, the reported death of Rommel, a general no longer on the battlefield, became distant, significant for newspapers, important for politicians, but far removed from the blood and mud of Lorraine. Not something to pause over,
See anything?
not something to reflect on,
All quiet
just another
for
piece
now.
of wartime news
Stay sharp.
while the fighting continued. When you're losing men every day, history feels very far away. The war ended, Germany collapsed, the Reich disappeared. And slowly, the archives began to open. Documents were discovered, testimonies were recorded. Officers who had remained silent during the war began to speak. The truth about Rommel's death could no longer be hidden. He had not died from wounds in Normandy. He had been forced to take his own life, given a choice designed to protect the regime, not the man. Historians later described it as a political execution carried out behind closed doors. The state funeral had been theater. The public mourning, carefully managed propaganda, and the image of a fallen battlefield hero, a carefully constructed illusion. But history has a way of correcting illusions. With time, Rommel's story became more complicated. A brilliant commander, a loyal officer, a man who served a regime that ultimately destroyed him. As for Patton, there is still no recorded reaction, no dramatic statement, no personal reflection in his diaries, only silence. And perhaps that silence says more than any speech could have. Two generals, both remembered, both studied, both shaped by war. But in October 1944, only one of them was still fighting. Rommel became a myth. Patton remained a commander in the field. Both are remembered, but only one was still paying the daily price of war. And that difference explains everything. If your family ever shared stories from World War II, write them in the comments. Real memories matter more than movies. And if you enjoy honest military history without myths, leave a like and subscribe so these stories reach more people.